It is the 28th of the 10th, 2024. The time is 10:05, and there are very many F1 threads at which we need to pull. Centering, of course, over yesterday's incident between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. Oh, the humanity. And I don't know where I stand on this, so I did a bit of a deep dive to understand first and foremost what other people are saying, their verdicts, who done it. Was Max Verstappen over the line, or is Lando Norris, as always, Mr. Glass half empty? Techie this, ladies and gents. Helmut Marko first and foremost chimes in and says that it was an overreaction, that the 20-second penalty that they gave Max Verstappen 2 times 10 was very harsh. He says he thinks it was an overreaction fueled from the incident that was the USA Grand Prix, that but for that they wouldn't have given Max Verstappen a 20-second penalty. Oh, the humanity. Helmut Marko continues as follows. You have 5 seconds and then you have 10 seconds. But now, in this instance, we have 2 10 seconds. That surely is too harsh. Unprecedented settings. How can you have that? Make that make sense. Helmut Marko puts forth the case, and I see his point. It is super harsh, but could you argue on the back of the context that the driver debriefing between GPDA, the drivers, the stewards and the race direction, that an incident so close after that meeting was always going to be met with the full force of the law, potentially? But again, Max Verstappen fans around the world will argue that the FIA have been nothing but inconsistent, consistently inconsistent. How can you not give a penalty to Max Verstappen at Austin and then give him 20 seconds? It is chaos. Lando Norris in real time on the back of the turn 5, turn 7 instance said as follows: this is really dangerous. Next time I will be in the wall. And that has to ring true, ring out as alarm bells as far as the stewards listening in real time. When asked after the fact, Lando Norris had this to say. Do you think, mate, this is a line in the sand moment from the stewards, that the race directors are finally clamping down on Max Verstappen's gaming of the system, his tax avoidance rather than tax evasion? And this is what Lando Norris had to say. This was a step on from Austin. At Austin, I don't think necessarily either one of us deserved a penalty. It was just hard racing. However, I respect Max. I look forward to the battle, says Lando Norris. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. But I think, said Lando Norris, that today at the Mexican Grand Prix, Max, his manoeuvre at turn 7 and turn 4, that they were just a step too far. This is what Lando Norris had to say. And again, this splits the community, right? Max Verstappen fans will say, what do you want about Lando Norris? You are flake, F1 snowflakery. Lando Norris fans will say Max was over the line yet again, just as he was and has been 2021. Abu Dhabi settings, Dubai, Saudi Arabia settings, Brazil settings. And this is where we need to get clarification on the rules. Christian Horner said as follows: when asked by Karun Chanduk, how did you see the incident at turn 5 and more pertinently the instance at turn 7? Karun Chanduk in his very question is implying that the turn 7 instance is more egregious than the one at turn 4. Christian Horner had this to say: Max didn't leave the track at turn 4. Turn 7, they both ran off. That it's dangerous territory that we're currently in. Very murky waters as far as the rules and regs that we're currently wading through as to what constitutes a dive bomb, says Christian Horner. What we need to do now is sit down with the FIA. 20 seconds as far as a penalty for Max was probably too harsh. 2 times 10. You have always got to play within the rules, by the rules, says Christian Horner. The bigger problem, however, for us, Red Bull Racing going forward and Max Verstappen, is pace or lack thereof. That's where our focus needs to be between now and the next 5 days, as at the Brazilian Grand Prix. And I don't disagree with this from Christian Horner. He makes the points. Although this harsh thing, the 20 seconds being too harsh, it depends on how you characterise the instances. I will get to what I think personally, my humble opinion, at the end of the video. Zack Brown, of course, diametrically opposed to Christian Horner. As you would expect, these are the 2 key team principles, the 2 protagonists as far as both the drivers and the Constructors' Championship. Here's what Zack Brown had to say. What did you think about the penalty, Mr. Zack Brown? He said 20 seconds probably wasn't enough. That as far as Max Verstappen and the way that he's races, his particular, very aggressive, combative brand of racing, Zack Brown says it's getting a bit ridiculous, really. Enough is enough. We've had enough. It was Austin and now it's the Mexican Grand Prix. We just want to see some clean racing, said Zack Brown. Congrats to the stewards though. They are doing their job. Are you going to do anything in addition to that though, Zack? Are you going to take this further? Zack Brown says, you know what? No, we'll leave it to the stewards. They're taking measures in real time. And of course, he's alluding to the driver debriefing and their plans to institute for changes to the guidelines that the FIA consider the rules and regs between now and the Qatar Grand Prix. Zack Brown continues that Lando Norris did really, really well and that we just want to see some good racing. We're going to let the stewards continue to handle it. Max, what did he have to say of this circumstance in the immediate aftermath of the Mexican Grand Prix? Max Verstappen said this. When asked, is the lack of pace making you push harder, Max Verstappen? Is all of the aggressive driving by dint now a function of your frustration at having a subpar car underneath you? Max Verstappen said the problem is when you're slower, I'm just being put in these positions. Of course, at the time he spoke about what can I do? My ERS is all over the place. I've got no battery charge. Max Verstappen continued post-race and said 20 seconds is a bit harsh, but there's no point in crying or moaning about the penalties because even without those penalties, we had no chance of winning. Asked on Checo, do you need more help from Checo? Is his material underperformance affecting, detrimenting your title challenge in real time? Max says Checo is not our biggest problem. It's the car. When the car improves, so too will Checo Perez's performance improve. Andreas Stella had this to say about Lando Norris and his driving. Our conversation, our internal reviews have always been very clear. Lando, we approve and confirm the way that he goes racing. He's clean. It's not for you to go out there and find justice for yourself. You go racing Lando Norris in a fair, sporting way. Don't be desperate. You don't have to prove anything, says Andreas Stella. You go racing fair and square. That is what we want from Lando Norris, and that is what we are getting from him. Outlaw, you're a legend. If a Brit competing in the WDC, is it better not to have a British steward? But I hear you, Outlaw. There is obviously a conflicting priority or conflicting demands in having British stewards steward British racers. It gets techie. Outlaw, far too kind, by the way. But I digress. Look. Here's what Brundle had to say, and here's where it gets very techie, ladies and gentlemen. When asked about the incident on Sky Sports F1, the internationally syndicated broadcast, here's what Martin Brundle had to say, legend of Formula One. He said, turn 4, cool. That incident is just racing room, apex, combined entry, combined exit. However, it's the second incident at turn 7 that I was more concerned about, more upset about, says Martin Brundle. Turn 7. He characterises thus. It was a red mist moment. He's lucky he didn't get a drive-through penalty for that, Max Verstappen. I'm so in awe of Max Verstappen. I hate it when he does this sort of thing because he's better than that moment at turn 7. Brundle says he doesn't need to do that. We know he's feisty. We know he's very feisty and aggressive as a driver. And that's what we want to see as F1 fans, as a community. It needs to be Senna and Prost because that's what gets the eyes in, says Brundle. We are about that as a Formula One community. That's exactly what we want to see. Nobody wants F1 snowflakery. But Martin Brundle concludes the second incident, the one at turn 7, that was way past the limit. Drivers can be bulls in a china shop, and to fix that then, the panacea is to have full-time consistent stewards, not these part-time jockeys getting paid £300 a day. And you know what, I have to be honest, as much as I love myself some Max Verstappen, you guys have heard me eulogise about this chap and his laps Sector 3 Monaco a couple of years ago. God tier. Qualifying laps at Suzuka. This dude has been brilliant. Imola, Barcelona, Canada this year, holding off a charging Lando Norris with better, faster wheels underneath him. I'm not sure that I can't concur with Martin Brundle here. I think he's absolutely on the money, and Mark Hughes of the race gets even techier. It gets techier. Ladies and gents, Mark Hughes of the race has accused Maximilian Verstappen of a targeted foul, saying that targeted foul spared Max Verstappen even worse of a defeat. And here's what Mark Hughes means. He gives Max Verstappen credit for being a brilliant driver, but also a brilliant racing mind. And his movement in turn 7 with Lando Norris was a function of that. Max Verstappen understood the lay of the land and that he was never going to win that race. But the principal competitor in the championship, one Lando Norris, absolutely could. Marko insinuates that Max Verstappen moved accordingly, realised that Lando Norris was on for 25 points and the turn 7 incident was a function of that. Was indeed Maximilian Verstappen, 3 soon to be 4-time champion, instituting measures accordingly. Professional foul, targeted foul, whatever you want to call it, reminiscent, some say, of Monza 2021, that Max Verstappen knew exactly what was going on and acted accordingly. Marko cites the Viaplay documentary where Max Verstappen said, "You do everything, quote, you can to win. Sometimes you even have to be a DICK to win." Marko contends that at turn 7, he's 60 metres later on the gas and almost 100 metres later on the brakes. Again, he's moving differently, isn't he? Anomalous circumstances. Marko of the race contends as follows, that Max Verstappen, though it was a very different instance, both turn 4 and turn 7 to what we saw at Austin, that this was yet another example of Max Verstappen being God tier in one sense, trying to game the system. As to whether he overstepped the line, that is another matter. Andrew Benson of the BBC on the Checkered Flag podcast even said as follows. When asked whether Max is driving now in frustration, Andrew Benson says of Max Verstappen the following, that his driving style hasn't changed, that many Max Verstappen fans contended that he'd matured, that he'd quelled, become less aggressive of a driver. But Andrew Benson says as follows, that was only a function of the fact that Max Verstappen had a dominant car and wasn't being challenged under this set of circumstances. Benson says the tricky thing, though, is knowing whether frustration has seeped into it. The fact that Max Verstappen was always super aggressive, you can't tell, you can't compare before and after, because that aggressive style, that aggressive lean, that brand of Max Verstappen peddling has and always will be there. So it's difficult to tell in real time whether frustration is impacting upon Max Verstappen. He says of Max Verstappen interviews that it looks like it is not. He seems very calm, but the difference, the delta between Messrs Norris and Verstappen for first in the Drivers' Championship is now less than it has been over the past couple of races. It came into this race weekend's Grand Prix 57 points. It is now 47. Oh, the humanity. And for what it's worth, my opinion on this circumstance is as follows. It would be difficult for me to justify Max Verstappen's actions if I hadn't given him the credit eulogised over Max Verstappen for the past 3, 4, 5 and 6 months. I, for one, think that dude is God tier. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a peddler more rounded, quicker over the course of one lap, more aggressive, more ruthless than this chap called Maximilian Verstappen, 3 soon to be 4-time champion. And I have to put some respect on his name. But that can't exist in a vacuum. If indeed I rate Max Verstappen so highly as one of the greatest ones, I can't chalk up particularly the turn 7 instance to just clumsiness. That has to be deliberate. And as I look back at the incident, it looks really, really bad. Dangerous, some may say. I cannot, for the avoidance of doubt, credit Max Verstappen in with all of his God-tier manoeuvres, with all of his God-tier Sector 3 at Monaco, closing up one Fernando Alonso to the tune of 3/10 over the course of a sector worth only 20 seconds. I can't give Max Verstappen credit for the defensive driving that was the USA GP this year, and not criticise him for the very clumsy move / deliberate tactical foul that was turn 7. It's techie, ladies and gentlemen, but you wouldn't want your F1 anything different, would you? It's got to be techie. It's got to be fine margins each and every single time. I will contend in conclusion as follows. Max Verstappen was over the line, particularly at turn 7. He deserved a penalty. Now, the penalty should be dictated by the rules and the International Sporting Code of Conduct, whatever it says in the regulations. But we don't have that because the FIA are consistently inconsistent. But I would conclude as follows. F1 is a better sport for having Maximilian Verstappen in. We are having conversations about it, and a rising tide floats all F1 boats. Maximilian Verstappen is nothing if not controversial. He's nothing if not that. Indeed, the lifeblood of Formula One at a time when F1 trends sometimes to F1 snowflakery. Per Martin Brundle, no one wants that. This needs to be Senna, Prost. This needs to be Schumacher and Villeneuve. Schumacher and Hill. It needs to be contentious. There needs to be stakes. Otherwise, no one will watch. The Drive to Survivation impact will trend itself back to zero. Liberty Media don't want that. You don't want that. And I definitely don't want that. F1 is a far better, more watchable sport for having Maximilian Verstappen, 3 soon to be 4-time champion in it. But I digress.